Okay, good evening everyone, welcome. Thank you for, as always, for joining, both online and in person. So we spoke last week about the first part of the introduction to Tefillah. We discussed the meaning, the translation of the words Tefillah, which is not a clear word at all. And what does it mean? It may come from Pilel, to judge, and if it's reflexive, it may mean some form of self-judgment. It may come from like patila, from a interwoven, like Rashi explains the word naftali, or a thread that's sort of intertwined because we become intertwined and very connected with Hashem. It may come from a word to think and to reflect, sort of self contemplation. It may be linked to the word to hope. When one davens, one has hope. Anticipation, that's the concept of tefillah, is that we hope and anticipate. We discussed these different meanings of the word. We also spoke about the three components of tefillah. All tefillah is either shavach, either it's praise of Hashem, the grandeur of creation, or it's bakasha, it's request, or it's hodah, it's thanks for things from which we personally benefit. And we also spoke about the sorry, just come back. So I'm just going to change something on my screen. So I'm a little distracted, something on the screen. We also spoke about the we spoke about the etymology and the meaning of the word, and we spoke about the halachot of Tefilla a little bit, where the halachot of Tefilla comes from, whether it is a daily mitzvah, a time-bound mitzvah, or whether it's a mitzvah that's on demand. When we have a need to daven, then we should daven, but without the need to daven, then there's no obligation to daven. That's what we discussed last time. Now, this time I want to address what's a very famous question, the philosophy of tefillah, the concept behind tefillah, which isn't a clear concept at all. And the famous difficulty with tefillah is how can it affect change? How can tefillah be effective? Surely Hashem knows everything, and if Hashem knows that we are meant to be meant to receive whatever it is that we are davening for, then surely He would grant that to us, irrespective of our davening. And if He didn't intend for us to have it, how can our tefillah, how can our davening make a difference? This question was asked by many. To the best of my knowledge, the first source that sort of explicitly asks it is the Sefer HaIkrim. Sefer HaIkrim, the meaning of the word Sefer HaIkrim is the Book of Fundamentals. It's a work from 1400 Spain, written by a Rishon, a medieval authority called Rabbi Yosef Albo. Rabbi Yosef Albo lived from the late 1300s, 1380, to the mid 1400s. He was a philosopher, a rabbi, and a Talmud of another known Spanish Rav, Rav Chasdai Kaskas, and he wrote a book called the Sefer HaIkrim, the Book of Fundamentals. And he says as follows: he says, I don't understand the purpose of tefillah. When I'm davening, I'm asking for something, I'm requesting something from Hashem. Is it good for me to get it, or is it not good for me to get it? Surely, if it is good for me to get it, then Hashem will give it to me, irrespective of whether I ask or not. And if it's not good for me to get, then He won't give it to me, irrespective of whether I ask or not. Surely, make up with your mind. Is it something that I'm meant to have, in which case, why should tefillah make a difference? I should get it anyway. Or is it something I'm not meant to have, in which case tefillah won't be effective? In order to put this differently, when we daven, we sometimes daven because there's something we want, something we wish to have. I've always wanted a particular car, I've always wanted a particularly sized house, I want my garden to look like this, I want this luxury, I want to be able to go on a holiday somewhere. Is that luxury good for me or not? Well, sometimes additional pleasures of life are good, and sometimes they're not good for me. Depends on how I use them, what my life's purpose is. Hashem knows whether it's part of my life's purpose, whether it's good for me to have or not. If it's good for me to have it, then surely He would give it to me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu built the world, Olam Chesed Yiboneh. Hashem built the world for it to be a source of kindness. Hashem is a Baal Chesed, He wants to give us kindness. If it's something that was good for me to have, then He would give it to me irrespective of my davening. And if it's not good for me, then why should my davening make a difference? Sometimes we don't daven because we want something positive, but we daven because we want the removal of something negative. We're going through a tough time. we're going through a difficult period, whether our physical health is affected, whether our well-being is affected, something's going on that's making us feel horrible, a relationship's not working out, whatever it may be, and we daven to Hashem to save us from our financial distress, from some difficulty that we're going through. Well, again, the same calculation applies. Is this difficult time that we're going through something which ultimately is part of the plan of Hashem, even though we don't and really don't understand it, and even though we struggle with it, in which case, why would my tefillah make a difference? So how can the tefillah alter what's going on in my life and my life plan? Now, again, it's very easy to sit here and say simplistic things from the comfort of a seat in an air-conditioned room in Hendon. And obviously, there are people, both other parts of the world and close to home, who are going through the most terrible experiences imaginable. I'm not being superficial or trite here about what we know or don't know about these experiences. There's much we don't know about Hashem's plan for the world. There's much we don't understand about why we're going through such difficult, why we might be going through such difficult times. This isn't about labeling a particular reason for why we go through such a difficult experience. But for whatever reason we are going through that difficult experience, how does asking Hashem to change it make a difference? What's the mechanism of how that makes a difference? If it's something we're meant to be going through for whatever reason, as much as we profoundly struggle with understanding and feel rejected, but we are going through that difficult experience, then we're going through it. Why should the tefillah make a difference? Why should that be able to alter our path? So asks the Sefer HaIkrim. So the answer that he gives is that the act of tefillah itself could make us better equipped to receive the good that we are asking for, to receive the bracha, the blessing that we wish to have. I've used the analogy before, but I'll use it again. We live in a world in which there's a constant overflowing, a constant outpouring of chesed. We live in a physical world where there's a constant outpouring of energy. We know that the sun gives off enough energy to provide the needs, all the energy needs of Earth, multiple times over. There's no energy crisis. There's no shortage of energy in the universe. The difficulty, the problem of shortage of energy is our ability to access it. We don't always have access to the energy. There's a limit to how much of the vast seconds by seconds radiation of energy and heat and light that the sun is giving out. There's a difficulty of how much we can receive of that. We have to build solar panels to receive it, and there's limits to how many solar panels we can build. So it depends on our ability to receive the energy, not the absolute overflow of energy that exists. And I'm using this not to make a point about the environment or anything like that, but to use it as an analogy for the world within which we live. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is overflowing with, he has more than enough chesed to give us. There's no shortage of chesed, but we, as individuals and as a world, are sometimes better or worse equipped to receive that. Now again, I'm not, and I don't want to be misunderstood, I'm not, God forbid, suggesting that when anyone is going through a hard time, it's because they're not receiving or not open to receiving the chesed of Hashem. There could be many reasons why a person is going through a hard time and why that's part of Hashem's plan. And there's so much that we profoundly don't understand about how Hashem operates. But sometimes part of what's going on could be that we aren't open to receiving the brachas from Hashem. What does that mean we're not open to receiving them? We're not in a state in which we would use those blessings for the good. And perhaps on the contrary, they would damage us. Were we to achieve prosperity or success or the like, maybe that would lead us to a smugness, an arrogance, a superiority. Maybe we would just use it to sink ourselves, to immerse ourselves in the pleasures of life, and it would detach us from spirituality, from ruchnius, from purpose, from meaning, and therefore it would prove rather than being a link and a connection to Hashem, it would instead become something that draws us away from Hashem. Through the process of davening, we educate ourselves, we change ourselves to become better equipped to appreciate and notice that which Hashem is giving us, such that now we are eligible to receive this chesed, this gift from Hashem. So says the Sefer HaIkrim in his way of explaining this concept. I'll come to in a second. He says that previous to the davening, it may be that it was wrong. It would have been bad for us to get this blessing. If we receive this particular luxury, this new car that I'm dreaming about, this holiday experience that I want, this home that I would love to have, maybe in doing that, it would create a gap. It would make me less receptive to Hashem in my life, because I would instead create the barriers to seeing Hashem of arrogance, of greed, of ego, of desire, of smugness, of physicality, and that would block my connection to Hashem. Through the process of asking, I am showing and I am changing myself and I'm working on myself such that I will, when I get this, I will recognize that this is a gift from Hashem and it's something that needs to be used for the good. And thus, in the new me, this is indeed a perfectly fine thing for me to get. Rav Kook says the same formulation in a very extreme form. And he says, if I've changed myself through davening, I'm like a new person. So Zobin version A was not meant to get this. But post-davening, I'm now a new person. I'm now Zobin B. I'm not Zobin A. I'm a different person. The new person is equipped, is qualified to get this. This new person has a completely different fate, a completely different destiny, a completely different role, a completely different a balance of that which they should or shouldn't be given. And therefore, the new person can get the gift which Hashem wants to give them, even though the old person wasn't entitled to it. So the Sefer Ikram asked, well, were you meant to get this or not? In Rav Kook's formulation, the answer is Zobin A wasn't meant to get this, but Zobin B was meant to get it. Or in the Sefer Ikram, it's a more classic variation of the same idea. He says, originally you weren't meant to get this. It would have been the worst thing in the world for you to get this. Because by getting it, you would have squandered it away and wasted it and used it just for physicality or physical pleasure, or for ego and arrogance, or to make you more smart. But now that you're davened, and in davening, in turning to Hashem, you ask a bakasha, you ask a request, you say a hodah, you give thanks to Hashem, you say shavach, you give praise to Hashem. In so doing, you are changing yourself into a person who is more reflective, more aware of Hashem in your life. You will now get this gift and use it for positive purpose. You will see, when you look at it, you'll see, this is the matana, the gift of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the gift of Hashem in my life. Now it's become something holy. The same car, which previously would have just been used for me racing up and down the motorway and enjoying life, nothing wrong with enjoying life, but would have made me just caught up in the pleasures of life and distance from Hashem, or arrogance. Now, every time I use it, I think, thank you, Hashem, for giving me this wonderful gift. Or maybe even more, I will start using it to do chesed, and I'll volunteer for gifts of the Shabbos walk, and I'll deliver things and help people. I'll use this car as a keli, as a utensil, as a vehicle, as a vessel to serve Hashem. Well, in that case, then indeed this is a genuine bracha. This is a blessing for me. Therefore, I'm entitled to it, and I deserve it, and it's something that's good for me. This is the thought of the Sefer HaBikrim. Sorry, you were waiting patiently. The flickering light, fair enough. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit handling the lighting here. Yes.
So we see through the version of kavana and that it's done enough when it can actually happen despite Hashem's control. For example, Hashem said, if you daven one more time, Hashem, then that's it again. So I had to think that if you daven something as much as one, then it can actually happen. But that actually goes against the law of maybe you daven to something because you think you need that or want that, but it's actually not good for you. So does Hashem ignore that in order to answer your question? You have no choice but to answer them.
Okay, it's a very, very good question. We will get to Parshas V'Chanan later, but given that you've raised it now, I'll just address it somewhat now. So the question that was being asked is that according to some midrashim, when Moshe davened and davened to Hashem, please let me go to Eretz Yisrael, Hashem said, please stop davening enough. Because if you continue to daven, I will grant it for you, but this isn't the plan. This isn't going to be good for Klal Yisrael. This won't be good for the Jewish people. So what does this mean? That we're somehow forcing Hashem to grant something? Is that the idea? So the concept is, first of all, there's no such thing as forcing Hashem. Hashem is the master of the universe. We humans can't force him to do anything. What Hashem is saying to Moshe is one of two messages. Either he is saying to Moshe, if you continue to daven, I will grant you this, because for you on a personal basis, you might deserve it. However, for Klal Yisrael, for the Jewish people, this will be unhealthy, this won't be good. They aren't at the level where you can anymore be the fit leader for them. They need a different leader. They've moved on, and you can't be their fit leader. And here the Medrash carries on and says, what will happen? You'll go in, you won't be the leader. You will be the leader, how's this going to work? You aren't the leader that can lead them into Eretz Yisrael in an appropriate way, given the gulf that's built up between you and them. So that's one way of understanding it. The second way of understanding it is that Hashem is saying to Moshe, if you continue to daven, I will do this because otherwise it will be a terrible chil Hashem. but it won't be good. In other words, there comes a point perhaps where for Klal Yisrael or for you to see that I am ignoring that which you're asking for is a chilul Hashem, but this isn't what's meant to be. Moshe, by the way, in a sense, has used that previously in his tefillas, because Moshe said to Hashem, "You are destroying the Jewish people. You want to destroy the Jewish people because they have sinned terribly with the Egan or whatever it may be. But Mitzrayim will look at this and they'll say, you took them out in a manner which was destined to lead to evil. And therefore the impression this makes on Mitzrayim is such that for you to destroy them would be a chilul Hashem, therefore you can't do so. In other words, it would blot, it would blur, it would be a barrier to awareness of the presence of Hashem in the world. That would be a disaster. Better for you not to destroy the Jewish people." So those are two ways of understanding the Medrash. But we can't force Hashem's hand. There's not really such thing as forcing Hashem to do what he doesn't want to do, unless he's chosen that. In other words, he said, "I bind myself to the power of Tefillah," or "I bind myself through a bris, through a covenant." But ultimately, Hashem is the master of the universe. Yes.
Understand how davening maybe can ability like lesson to do. But is it because we change? Is it because now the government is more open to the real purpose of life and therefore automatically our thinking less about this car? Our thinking will be more inclined towards how do I use it for the best way? Or does it include a part of our spirit of being whereby how does that change us?
Okay, really good question. What exactly is changing over here? So you can say this in two forms, depending on your style of vocabulary, but really they come down to the same thing. You can either say in spiritual language, which is, or three forms really, you can say the same idea. You can either say in spiritual language, which is you get the zechus, you get the merit to get this, even though previously you didn't have the merit to get it. Now, when we talk about getting a zechut, a merit for something, we picture it as coins in the piggy bank, right? How many tokens have you got? So if you daven, you eventually, every time you daven, you get a token for davening, a reward voucher for davening. If you get 100 reward vouchers, you now have enough vouchers in the piggy bank to pay for something, for the thing that you wanted. So we can understand it very superficially, which is, it's a superficial, childish way of understanding it, but it has some truth to it. We can understand it in a more elevated level, in which we understand that the word zechut, is linked to the word zachut. Zachut means refinement, like shemen zayit zach, the refined, fine, purified oil. When we talk about a mitzvah giving you a zachut, we don't just mean that you're getting vouchers in the piggy bank. We mean you're changing yourself, you're refining yourself. The new refined you doesn't act as a barrier to getting reward. It doesn't act as a barrier to recognizing Hashem. It's a thinner screen, one which allows the presence of Hashem to radiate more inside us. It's a better solar panel. So it acts better. The analogy I've used again before is, if you've got it light outdoor, but you have thick curtains closing the way, then no sunlight will come in. If you put thin net curtains there, then more energy will be able to radiate in. If you change yourself from being a thick, coarse curtain to being a refined net curtain, then more energy, more light of Hashem will be able to come in. So this is the one level, the sort of spiritual model of understanding Zachut. I'll come to you in a moment. You can also understand that on an intellectual level, we train ourselves to think differently. Now, when you see this, when you make a bracha, you no longer see this cup just as a source of pleasure. You see it as a radiated energy gift of Hashem. What a wonderful thing. You see this physical water as a matana, as a gift, a kindness from Hashem. You daven and you get this car. I see that as a bracha from Hashem. Not just do I see it as a gift of Hashem, I see it as a tool to be used to do something good with. I'll drink this water and it'll give me energy to teach Torah, or to even just appreciate the pleasure of the water and recognize Hashem in my life. So in that model, it's a sort of intellectual exercise. It's almost an educative exercise. It's like going to school. I use the metaphor of going to school because, of course, the Yiddish word for a synagogue, a Beit Knesset, is a shul. What does shul mean? Shul is the German Yiddish word for school. So in early Ashkenaz, in around the year 1000, as Judeo-German began developing and Yiddish became a Jewish language, the word they chose for shul was shura, was a school, in other words, they saw a Beit Knesset as being a Beit Medrash, as a place of learning. They saw it as being an educative experience. So points out Shimshon Falhash. So you can say it as an intellectual exercise, as an exercise of teaching. So that language, they're all the same idea. Language number one is the vocabulary of zchut, merit, zachut. Language number two is educative. That's the language of Shimshon Valhash. Language number three is the language of Rav Kook. I'm changing myself into a different person. I'm molding myself into a different being. That's the language of the mystics. But all three ideas are really the same. They're just different vocabularies for the same concept. Yeah, and I'll come to you. Yeah.
What about davening for somebody else? So if somebody's ill and you daven for them, it's not really asking something for yourself.
Okay, how can we daven for someone else? Two answers to that. The first answer is because to the degree that I'm davening for them, I'm recognizing a commonality. I'm recognizing a care for them, and therefore I'm affected by it also. We live in an ecosystem in which all of us are intertwined and interaffected, and therefore them ceasing to struggle is a gift for me too. And therefore, to the degree that their pain and their upset bothers them is the degree to which, the degree to which their pain and their upset bothers me is the degree to which I can daven for them, because in essence, I'm really davening for myself, because we live in an ecosystem in which we're all interlinked and interrelated. That's one way of putting it. Another way of putting it is, to the degree that I'm aware of their experiences, when I see them being gifted by Hashem, I become aware of the gifts of Hashem. So even though maybe they're oblivious to it, because they're completely unconcerned with that, but I see the presence of the gifts of Hashem. So whether I get the cup of water to drink or you get the cup of water to drink, the water is being drunk and I'm seeing the radiant gift and energy of the chesed of Hashem flowing into this world. That's an equal gift. This is the idea in the thinking of the mystics of why a tzaddik is uniquely equipped to daven for other people. It's not just that the tzaddik is a righteous person and therefore their tefillah somehow is more effective than my tefillah. It's that a tzaddik is their soul is intertwined with the soul of their generation in the thinking of the Hasidim, for example. They are sensitive to the movements of the web that connects all humanity. They are the pipeline through which the chesed of Hashem comes into the world. And therefore, since they share Tzaddik Yesod Olam, the pasuk says, a tzaddik, a righteous person, is the foundation of the world, the Yesod of the world. Yesod Olam, the foundation of the world, Yesod Olam. So the tzaddik, if the tzaddik is the foundation of all existence, therefore the tzaddik feels and carries the weight of the whole generation on them, sustains and feeds the generation, and therefore the tzaddik's tefillah is uniquely equipped to daven for everyone else. It's interesting, we give the name tzaddik to a few figures in Jewish history, and they are always associated with this quality of feeding the generation. Yosef HaTzaddik. Unmute. Okay, so apologies, I'm not sure why what's going on with my internet, but it stopped working here in the shul. And I was just saying, perhaps it's a reminder to everyone who joins online that you are more than welcome to come live, where you'll get a better quality experience and not rely on the dodgy internet that's working here. Can someone who's online just tell me what the last thing that you heard me saying was, just so I can sort of take off from where I was up to?
You talking about Yosef HaTzaddik?
Yes, okay, you heard me till then. Excellent. Okay, so I was just saying that the concept of a tzaddik is the term Yosef HaTzaddik, the Binyamin HaTzaddik, is used for someone who sustains the generation, and to the degree that we are all intertwined, tzaddik Yesod Olam, a tzaddik can daven for someone else. That's the concept of the power of tefillah of a tzaddik. Sorry, you wanted to ask me something, and I stopped because of the internet problems. Zechus is linked to the word zachut, which means refinement. The word zach, as in shemen, zayit, zach. Zach means refinement. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay, so you're yeah. It's two very important questions. Okay, so for those online, the first question was, but is this really the case that Hashem always answers us? Does Hashem always answer us? And the second is about, isn't the essence of B'tochen and Emunah that ultimately Hashem, whatever Hashem's plan is what's going to be. What does it mean to want something other than what's been granted to us by Hashem? So there's two answers really, and the two questions are interlinked. The first question is a good opportunity for me to emphasize again that the message of this is not that Hashem will always say yes to our tefillas. And the message is not to simplify suffering or us not getting what we want and claim it's always because we don't recognize what we're getting from Hashem, or we're unappreciative, or we're barriers to the chesed of Hashem. There's clearly many, many reasons why we go through difficult times in our lives or don't get that which we want. And sometimes we can understand some of the reasons, sometimes we have no idea, sometimes we need to recognize that we are mortals in the presence of Hashem. Lo machshavosai machshavosechem, Hashem's thoughts are not our thoughts. Sometimes terrible things happen in the world. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, moments before he's martyred by the Nazis or the Nazi accomplices in the Second World War, having come back from America to stand by his yeshiva, he gave a very famous speech around this. And he said, we don't understand. We're limited ultimately. We don't understand. That's certainly not my message to simplify the problem of evil and the problem of suffering, which is a very profound and difficult matter. All I'm saying is that sometimes, on occasion, tefillah can be a tipping point in granting us something which otherwise we wouldn't have had. How so? By changing us. Because beforehand, we lacked awareness of the bracha of Hashem, or we weren't going to use this positively, and through davening, that affects us. It changes our zachut, it grants us, it makes us into a new person, as per of Cook, it's educative, as per of Shulchan Aruch, it's a school of sorts. But all those things are good. We're now closer to awareness of Hashem, and therefore we deserve that which we are going to get. In all these explanations, tefillah is reflexive. It's changing me. The hits of Hallel, it's reflecting on. It changes me into being a different sort of, I'll come to in a moment. It changes me to becoming a different sort of person, someone who now is capable of receiving the gifts from Hashem. Now, to what degree should we fight? To what degree should there be things that we want that we aren't getting? So there's really 2 points to be said around this. Okay. Phone is playing up a bit. There's really 2 points to be said around this issue. The first point is that you may be right. Maybe a very great person is able to make their desires match the will of Hashem, and therefore never want anything which is other than that which Hashem wants. The Mishnah says, "Asay Ritzono, make that which you want into that which He wants," and there shouldn't be a gap between the two of them. However, we're not all on that level, and there are gaps between what we want and what Hashem wants, and therefore we make efforts in life, and if we struggle in other areas of our life to achieve, then what's wrong with also struggling with tefillah to achieve? That's point number 1. Point number 2 is even for the greatest tzaddik, at the end of the day, we have a certain sense of that which is right and that which is wrong, that which ought to be and that which ought not to be. We're human beings. We're boss of Adam. However great we are, we're flesh and blood. Indeed, because lo machshavosai machshavosechem, because we don't understand the minds of God, and God has given us a tselem elokim. He's given us a mind to think for ourselves. We are entitled to turn to Hashem and say, I know nothing. I know I'm limited. But you gave me a mind. You didn't give me a mind and emotions and feelings for nothing. You want me to use them. You gifted them to me. And therefore you gave me the right to turn back to you and say, I don't understand what's going on. You gave me permission to daven. You gave me permission to argue with you. If you, Hashem, turn to me and you say, I am good, choose life, or b'chata b'chaim, choose life, because with you, Hashem, is the source of life, because I want you to do good, there has to be a meaning that we humans have to what the word tov, what the word tov means, what the word good means. There has to be something within our vocabulary. It has to, and if Hashem speaks to us, He's given us ownership of words. And as soon as we have ownership of words, we are able to turn to Hashem and say, now you have to live up to your words. And so if Hashem would turn to us and say, silence, you know nothing about me. There's nothing that I want. I don't want a relationship with you humans. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to give you a vocabulary. And then you're right, we couldn't turn to Hashem and say anything back. But because Hashem gave us the gift of speaking to us, as soon as he gives us the gift of speaking to us, we can speak back to him. Because as soon as he says something to us, he's saying, you humans understand words, you understand language. And if you understand language, you can now speak back to me. And that's the source of tefillah. If Hashem turns to Avraham and says, I am a shofet, I am a judge, and that has meaning because the word justice is a human word, it means something to us, then Avraham is entitled to turn back to Hashem and say, are you the judge of all the world not going to do justice? If Hashem turns to humans and says, I am Oseh Chesed, I do goodness, Onam Chesed Yibana, I build a world of kindness, then we can turn to him and say, I'm sorry, this isn't kindness. How can you put me through this? How can you send me through the gates of hell and then say this is chesed, this is kindness? So you've given me, by telling me that you are doing chesed, by you turning to me and saying, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chamim, I am a God of mercy, that's the very source of what allows us to turn back to him and say, to now live up to your own claims. The Chazal teach us that Hashem taught Moshe the gift of davening when he taught him the Yud Gibel Midos Harachamim, the attributes of mercy, Hashem, Hashem, etc. He taught him the gifts of Rachamim. It says, Nisatei Lefonov, he enrobed himself in front of Moshe, as someone leading davening. In other words, by Hashem telling us he's a Baal Chesed, he gives us the opportunity to come back to him and say, so do chesed. You may have your deep calculations way beyond my imagination, why this misery I'm going through is for my good, but I don't see it. I'm suffering. I'm not seeing your chesed. And you've told me that chesed means something, so now please give that to me. I ask you for that. So that's the source of tefillah. This is really what I meant last week when I said that we take the gift of tefillah for granted, but it isn't for granted. Chaim Brisker taught us that even though there's a debate between the Rishonim whether davening is compulsory every day or only when I need it, but the concept of tefillah is a Torah concept. Because it's not obvious that there's a concept of tefillah. Who says I, as a human being, can turn in front of Hashem and say, Hashem, give this to me. Who am I to speak to Hashem? Who says I can speak to Hashem? And also Hashem has gifted us the ability to speak to him because he gave us voice. He gave us sounds, he gave us words. As soon as we have sounds, as soon as we have words, we have the right to turn back to Hashem and ask for things. Okay, so very good question. Again, for those online, the question was asked, but tefillah is not just about asking for Hashem, it's about building a relationship. Tefillah is three things. It's shvach, it's praise of Hashem, it's hodah, it's thanks, and it's bakosha, it's asking. What we're saying now is that even bakosha, even a request, has an element of shvach and hodah to it. Because in requesting something, we're acknowledging Hashem's power and recognizing we need to use that which we're given for the good. And that's also part of relationship building. Part of a relationship is recognizing I need from someone else. You know, you can only build a relationship with someone else if you're willing to give 100%, but also if you're willing to receive. You can't be in a relationship with someone unless you can also give them the gift of gifting to you. If you can acknowledge, I'll come to you in a moment, if you can acknowledge, I need you also. That's part of a relationship. So especially when we are mortals, when we are humans, finite beings standing in the presence of the infinite God, asking is also part of the relationship. I want to just tie this up to in a sense, to connect with what we were speaking about last week, because the clock is ticking and also my battery on my phone is ticking due to our Zoom problems, unfortunately. We define tefillah as avodah, a service of Hashem. The Rambam said that tefillah is a daily obligation because the pasuk says, right, we saw that the first Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, to serve Hashem with all your heart. Says the Rambam, it's really Chazal, but the Rambam in his own way gives this a certain flavour and explains it in a certain way. He says, Eiz avodah shebelev, what's the primary internal heart-based avodah, service of God, work that we have? Tefillah. Tefillah is work and service Hashem by asking him for things. And the answer is, according to the Sefer Ikrim, Rashim Shafal Hash, Rav Kook, all those different languages that we've used, the Sefer Chinuch, the different languages that we've used to explain the same idea, that tefillah is service of Hashem. Number one, it's service of Hashem, because in recognizing that Hashem is the source of everything, I'm bowing to him, I'm serving him, I'm acknowledging his mastery of my life, his gifting of everything to me. That's the service. And it's also hard work. La'avdo can be translated to serve him, or it can be translated to work for him. And we are serving Hashem by davening, we're also working for davening. Davening is an effort. It's with toil. It's with sweat. It's with tricks. It's effortful, and those are the two dimensions of tefillah. Tefillah is indeed avodah, service of Hashem, because in submitting to Him, hodah, thanks, in shvach, in praise, and even in bakasha, in asking, inherent in all three are a service, a recognition of Hashem, and it's an avodah because it's a self work. It's working on myself. To improve, so explains Samson Rapalash and explaining Tefillah. So Julia, waiting, and then I'll come to you. Yeah.
It's giving us
All of that. Yes, absolutely. It changes our perspective, how we view the world, because we see that which we have as not just our own might and grandeur, but gifted to us from Hashem, and as things that we need to use for the good. So 100%, yeah. Educative. When we say educative and intellectual, we really mean perspective. It changes how we view things. Yeah.
and kavana. Don't think about the best stuff. How are you becoming the best of you? And like, for example, I have relatives that being like it's 2 minutes, the Shemona Esrei, and like how to sit there and like concentrate. Instead of becoming the person, it becomes the schedule, just finish and then leave.
Okay, so one of the reasons I'm giving this series is because I want it to be practical. Now, tefillah is one of the very hard things that we do. It's hard on lots of levels. It's hard because it's very abstract. It's hard because it is repetitive and regular. And it's hard because it's not Shana Kodesh and we don't even understand what we're saying. There's no magic solution to any of that. All one can do is learn so that we understand better the meaning, and try and concentrate at least sometimes. I mentioned last week that what the Rambam considers to be the basic level of kavana, others say is impossible to do on a regular basis. It's so challenging. So there's kavana and there's kavana and there's kavana. But the truth is, it's all worth it, even if once a month we daven with kavana. So of course, it'd be nice if every single tefillah we daven with kavana, and we should aim for that. But the truth is, even if once a month, view brachos and tefillah as a framework. It's an empty framework. Meaning to say, if we don't fill it with meaning, it's just a structure, it's just a grid. But if we fill it with meaning, then we can fill it with content. And it's worth davening 3 times a day for 30 days. If one of those ends up as having kavana, that's great. Okay, that's successful. And you know what? The truth is, to fill it with kavana doesn't have to take ages and ages. It can be a 4-minute, 3-minute amida. It doesn't have to be ages and ages. It can take a few minutes. Sometimes actually davening faster can help you have more kavana than davening so slowly that you sort of lose concentration. You can enhance your tefillah immeasurably by adding about 60 seconds worth to the length of, or 30 seconds worth to the length of your davening. If before you say each bracha, you pause for 4 seconds and think, I'm about to ask for this, that's already a meaningful bracha with kavana. So, okay, I'm about to ask for the gift of intelligence and my reasoning. I'm about to ask for the gift of health. I'm about to ask for livelihood. How long does that take? About 7 seconds, 5 seconds each bracha extra. There's 18 brachas, so it's 18 times 5, or 90 seconds, whatever. And you could do it in 3 seconds, so it can be literally a minute extra to your davening. It doesn't have to be long to have a level of kavana. And at its most basic, all tefillah is awareness. I'm standing in front of Hashem and I'm asking for things. You don't always need fancy, high level kavana. Sometimes have it great, and sometimes basic, but that's also fine. It's also a good tefillah. Sorry, did I? Yes, sorry. Yeah, Dayan double. Sorry. And work. Avodah is in service, and avodah is in work. Yeah. I think I just said the 2 meanings of the word avodah. That tying it back to the Rambam says that tefillah is avodah shebelev la'avdu b'chol avavchem, that we discussed last week. So I was tying up tefillah to that. Okay. So those are understandings or explanations of tefillah. Tefillah is self-worth, it's self-educative, and it is it's an avodah. It's a work in the service of Hashem. I want to add though one final point, because I see that this is a misunderstanding that can creep into tefillah, and I think in a way this is the most important part of everything I've been trying to say this evening. We can mis-see tefillah and think that it gives us levers of control. In other words, how do we control this world we live in? We're vulnerable human beings, that's a fact. Religious, not religious, believe in Hashem, don't believe in Hashem. It's a fact, we're vulnerable, right? We're little ants on the face of a very large globe, which is a very small corner of a vast universe. And we're very vulnerable, things happen. We can be walking along the road, sitting in this room completely safe, and out of the heavens crashes an asteroid, walking along the street and a vehicle veers out of control. We're very vulnerable. You know, we can be going through life happily and healthily, and God forbid, a little mutation occurs in a gene, and suddenly we're grappling with the most profound health issues. We're vulnerable. That's a fact of human existence. Now, Yiddishkeit, religion, a relationship to Hashem, is not meant to be a tool to lose sight of that vulnerability. And sometimes we can think that tefillah just arms us with another crowbar, another tractor, another piece of machinery, another tool to navigate this world. So if you're not a believer in Hashem, if you don't daven, then you have tools to use the world. You have tractors, and you have crowbars, and you have computers, and you have our minds and our brains, and these are the tools that we use to leverage the world and how we want it. If we are believers in Hashem, then we have another tool. We have prayer. That's another tool that we have to serve Hashem, another tool that we have to leverage what we want. That's the opposite of tefillah. If we think that tefillah is a tool to use to have control, we're doing the opposite of what davening is about. Davening is about buying into our vulnerability, accepting we're vulnerable, accepting we are mortals, creatures, created beings of the infinite God. It's not about fooling ourselves into thinking that we went through not so long ago COVID, right? COVID was a time when we were reminded that for all our technology and all our strength, we're vulnerable. We could think sometimes when we're going through that davening means we have a solution. We can turn to Hashem, and that's a way we can control the course of life. Davening is not about fooling ourselves that we have control. Davening is about letting go of control. Davening is about recognizing that we're not in charge of the physical world within which we live, that we are in the hands of a greater power. And the problem with everything we've been saying till now is that too easily it can be misunderstood into thinking it's a message of, therefore you're in control and you can daven and that's your tool to fix everything up. Tefillah is the opposite. It's surrender to Hashem. Don't think that when we're talking about, tefillah makes me a better vehicle to receive the gifts of Hashem, that therefore somehow it's almost like robotic. I control the button, I press the magical buttons of tefillah, and now he has to give it to me. It's the opposite. Tefillah is turning to Hashem and saying, I'm recognizing that you're in control, I'm not in control. And everything I was saying till now about it was almost like a stage one, in which I was saying, there's other factors here, so it doesn't always work like this. I'm not trying to simplify and saying tefillah is just the answer. What I'm trying now to say is that the essence of tefillah is letting go, is recognizing I'm not in control. And here we get back to the passage that you quoted right at the beginning, va'etchanan. The root word, Rashi says this is the word for tefillah. The root of the word is chanan, chein, favor. Favor means it's a favor. When you turn to someone and say, do me a favor, you're not saying you owe this to me. You demand it. It's not a lever of control. It's undeserved. The essence of what Eschanan is, I'm turning to Hashem. Moshe davens to Hashem. That's the opening words of Pashas. Eschanan, the second Pasha in Sefer Devarim. And he says to Hashem, I'm pleading with you. Please let me answer it. Well, Hashem's answer is no, because Hashem is entitled to answer no. The root of the word chanan is chein. Favor is linked, by the way, etymologically to the word chinam, free. And the essence of a favour is you're giving it to me free, because I'm not paying its full price. Maybe I pay a bit for a favour, but I'm not paying its full price. Otherwise, it's not a favour. It's a transaction. Tefillah is not a transaction. It's not that I'm paying the coins of tefillah and in return I'm buying off Hashem something. It's the opposite. It's surrendering to Hashem and saying, I'm me and I've done what I can and I can't anymore. I'm handing over to you, Hashem. Please do me the favor and look after me. I'm vulnerable to you. I'm needy to you, and you're in control. I'm not the one in control. You're the boss. That is the truth of tefillah. This is the depth of tefillah. one of the reasons, by the way, why certainly in the non-Hasidic world, in the Ashkenazi non-Hasidic world, there's a little bit of fear of the concept of a skula, because the skula can begin feeling like it's a magic button. It can feel like it's a lever of control. I know this Kabbalistic secret, and I know how to control the hidden spiritual secrets of the world and do it. Now, it's not that these things don't exist. Some of these skulas come from very holy sources and from great people. But a great person can do it, who will realize that what they're doing is a way of drawing closer to Hashem and serving. For a lot of us, it's tefillah. When you do a tefillah like that, as a skula, it becomes, oh, I've now got the secret of control. That's the opposite of what davening is meant to be. You know, I'm only saying this half seriously, but I mean a serious point by this. Sometimes people say, I'm going to daven for 40 days because that's a great skula to get what I want. So much better daven for 39 days. So you're not thinking, oh, I tick this box, it's a checklist. I tick the box, I get through my 40 days, and now Hashem has to do that. That's the opposite of serving Hashem. Serving, that's asking Hashem to serve me. Hashem isn't a waiter with a capital W in the heavens who's there to present with us on a tray that which we want from him. We're there to serve him, to acknowledge his mastery of the world. So many years ago I spoke to my Rosh Hashiva, someone I was close to who's going through a very tough time, and someone suggested saying to him for this person, which is very reasonable, that all extended family and friends of this individual should say to him. And then they suggested we should do what's called Tehillim of the Chidah. Chidah was Chaim Yosef David Zolai, a very, very great Sephardi Gadol and Kabbalist and very, very important halachist, central figure. And he taught us that if you say Tehillim in a certain manner, it can act as a particularly effective tool. Basically, you say all the psukim that begin with Aleph, all the psukim that begin with Beis, and so on. And I wasn't happy to do this. And I said to this person, I'm going to ask my Rosh Hashiva whether we should do it. And he accepted the compromise because I knew what he would answer. I knew what my Rosh Hashiva would answer. And my Rosh Hashiva's response taught me so much. He said, and I'm slightly misquoting him, but I'm saying the essence of what he said. He said, if you daven Tehillim in a regular manner, you know what you're doing. It's very clear. Standing in front of Hashem and you're pouring out your heart to him. You're asking him, you're saying we're desperate, this person's going through a tough time, we love him, he's our family, he's our friends, we want them to be looked after, please Hashem help them. If you begin saying the Tehillim of the Chidah, Aleph, 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 base, 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 it loses being obviously a tefillah, and it becomes pressing buttons, it becomes levers. That's the opposite of what tefillah is for. Why did the Chidah design such a thing? For great people like himself, for Kabbalists, those who understand these things. For them, maybe somehow by davening like that, in ways that we don't understand, this is a way of drawing closer to Hashem. Maybe it's a greater surrender, because I'm not even saying psukim in an order, I'm saying them in the order of the Aleph base, which has been gifted to us by Hashem. So the Kabbalists have identified this segula as a greater way of serving Hashem. But when we do it, we lose that, and it becomes like a lesser way of serving Hashem. What's the idea of 40 days? 40 days Nishmas, 40 days of Tehillim. 40 days, Chazal teach us, is the formative period. It's the time that something becomes, it's created. There's 40 days of rain at the time of the Mabul. Moshe ascends to the heavens and receives the Torah for 40 days. Chazal tell us, and this is that after 40 days after conception, a fetus begins forming. 40 days is a formation. Davening for 40 days says recreate yourself into a different person. It's not just something davening for one day, you're davening for 40 days. You're creating yourself into a new sort of person, a person who is so humble and is such a profound servant of Hashem, and so much recognizes that the world is a gift from Hashem, and so much recognizes that we are servants of Hashem, and that everything we get is from Hashem. That's what it's about. But if we do it for 40 days, it just becomes like a lever of control. I've said my prayer for 40 days, now Hashem has to grant it to me somehow magically. The Torah comes to oppose magic. This week's Sedra, right, Bollock, the second of our two Sedras this week, Lehava Israel, right, there shouldn't be magic in Torah as well. Magic is an attempt just to find another lever of control, and the Torah wants us to let go of these sort of fake levers of control, or even real levers of control, and recognize that ultimately we're in the hands of Hashem. Now, of course, we have an obligation to do others, we have to make our effort, but let's not lose spirituality and make spirituality just another lever of control, and it becomes the opposite of what it's meant to do, in which it's a recognition that we are biyad Hashem. So next week we'll look at this same idea in more detail. Please God, it means Hashem will look at the same idea in more detail. But for now we're going to stop today. And just to summarize what we've said so far, we started with the question of Sefer Ikrim. How can I daven? How can davening make a difference? If Hashem wants us to have it, he wants us. If he doesn't want us to have it, he's not going to grant it to us. We saw different formulations of the same answer. But all the answers come down to, in this understanding, that there's something reflexive about this, something reflective. I'm acting on myself, I'm changing myself, I'm molding myself, I'm making myself a better recipient of the kindness of Hashem. Obviously, there's many reasons why we struggle in life, why things don't work out. But one of the reasons is being dealt with through tefillah, in which we're saying I'm a better receptacle of bracha. I've reschooled myself, I've re-educated myself, I've changed how I see the lenses through which I see the world. And then the final point we said was that this isn't meant to be I can daven and get what I want. It's I can daven and it let go of my feelings of control, and hopefully we hope and pray that Hashem will then kindly, out of his chen, out of his chinon, free graciousness as a favor, will grant us that which we want. Next week we will look at how this translates not just into avodah, service of Hashem, but standing in front of Hashem. And this is the crucial key we've been missing. I was asked earlier how surely tefillah is a relationship, and I said even asking for something is a relationship. Next week I want to take that deeper, and I want to show how it's not just asking for something which is a relationship, but how this act of surrender is really the ultimate avodah of Hashem, how we stand in the presence of Hashem. I said that really, to kavana, you asked me about kavana, how to be daven. I said it's really very simple. It doesn't need to be fancy. It can be, but it doesn't need to be. So I'm standing in the presence of Hashem, and I'm asking things. We haven't yet really explained what we mean by standing in the presence of Hashem. The Rambam paskins that this is a halacha. The essence of tefillah is an awareness that I'm omeid b'fnei HaMelech. I'm standing in front of the king. And the next week, I'm going to try and look at what we mean when we talk about standing in front of Hashem, what it means to say we're standing in front of God. But this act of surrender is the third meaning of avodah. Avodah means work. Avodah means service of Hashem, and avodah means sacrifice to Hashem. What's tefillah parallel to? The korbanos. What's a korban? A sacrifice. When we sacrifice to Hashem, we are giving up something to Hashem. When we daven, we are surrendering and giving up and sacrificing something to Hashem, and that's what we will explore next week. We'll start next week with philosophy, and then we'll move on to practical meditation about how we daven. The time is 28 past. My battery is down to 1% because I've had to use my phone rather than the computer because the internet system here failed. So I'm going to stop here and wish everyone a good evening, and thank you so much for joining both live and online. And my battery's just died. Okay.
Thank you.